Well, Representative Tonko, once again, it's good to be with you on the floor, and sadly reliving what you and I discussed here almost a year ago in response to Hurricane Irene and the devastation that occurred in your community. It seems to me that there are many, many lessons to learn here, some of which I talked about before you came in. Certainly the ability to know well ahead of time what is coming. We saw with Hurricane Sandy that the NASA and was able to anticipate, the Weather Service was able to anticipate the nature of the storm and where it was going. That ability to understand what is happening and likely to happen really comes from the support of the federal government appropriating money to those agencies and then directing those agencies to provide those services. This is something we need to keep in mind. As we go through the deficit reductions that we must do, we must begin the prioritization of those things that are critical to the well-being, indeed the lives, of Americans. We also know that we're going to have to rebuild. Ms. Velasquez was suggesting that it was some $20 billion for New York City alone. And Mr. Pallone didn't give us a number, but we can anticipate billions for the New Jersey area and then the areas in upstate New York and Pennsylvania with lesser numbers, fortunately, but nonetheless it begins to add up to a huge amount of money. And some of the damages are not well known even today. I was talking with representatives of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, 500 of whom came from Northern California to assist in New York, and we were talking about what those men and women were doing. They said in the subway systems that were flooded, they were flooded with seawater. And the effect of salt on the electrical systems is, it's over. You got to replace the entire electrical system. But not just to replace it, but then to anticipate that it could happen again. And so to upgrade the entire infrastructure, to provide the protection that should it happen, you won't lose the entire subway system as did occur in New York City. So we need the infrastructure to be replaced, but then also significantly enhanced. This is a very, very expensive proposition. It's also a way in which people could go back to work and we could enhance the employment. We can do this. In fact, indeed, we must do it. The American Society of Civil Engineers has said clearly that the infrastructure of America, not just New York City and New Jersey, but my own state of California, the flood control systems we have in our state, is woefully inadequate, and they address it as a D. Fortunately not an F, but not an A, not a B, not a C, but a D. So we know that we have extraordinary needs here. The President, in his American Jobs Act, proposed a $50 billion addition to what we normally do with our infrastructure, which is a lot, but an additional $50 billion to be spent in 2 to 3 years. That's a critical boost, and I know the cities I represent, the Sacramento area, Natomas area, one of the most dangerous places in America for flooding, Marysville and Yuba City, the Delta, where I live, all subject to flooding. We need to enhance our levees in order to protect ourselves not from a 100-year, but from a 200-year storm, which is much more likely to occur. We can pay for these things. This doesn't have to add to the deficit. For every dollar we put into infrastructure, we get $2 plus back in economic growth. So it's actually an investment, short-term and long-term investment that will last for years. There's another thing that we have, and they're no longer authorized. Part of the Recovery Act, the stimulus bill, was the creation of Build America bonds. The President proposed that as part of his infrastructure program. The Build American bonds, which are called BABs, took me a while to figure that one out, but BABs, Build America bonds, are partly funded by the federal government and partly funded by the local agencies, but had an enormous effect on enhancing infrastructure, sanitation systems, water systems, and communities. Let's talk a little bit about these kinds of things, the effect that they may have in your communities in New York, Pennsylvania, and others.
Sure. Well, absolutely, some of these programs are welcome news. 2 points I would make, and I would just like to go back for a moment about the sense of community that's expressed at times like these tragedies. It's not government as a standalone solution. We understand that, but it's an essential part, and we want effective government. We also have had private sector response and volunteerism. I mean, the sense of volunteerism, that sense of American spirit, comes right into the fore of all of this expression, and you begin to understand the greatness of this nation through some of the darkest hours that we share. So that point has to be made clear, but to your point about infrastructure improvement, infrastructure bank bill, transportation bill that provides for adequate amounts of resources, putting together these bonds that are unique in design so that we can have the resources to make it happen. I absolutely agree. I contend that as we get impacted by some of the storm and Mother Nature occurrences, we need to make certain we reach to facts. And if data are telling us that you're going to have additional activity, 2 things need to happen. You need short-term and long-term response. You do not rebuild exactly as you had. You need to retrofit that to the projected impacts of now a newer, stronger force of Mother Nature. And secondly, we need that global policy. We need policy that speaks to the environmental outcomes. If we're ignoring that, we're going to see a hasty buildup, I believe, of some of these situations, which are only going to drain our budgets. So it's time to be academic and to be economically wise and effective here. And I think that's what voters have asked for, that's what the electorate asks for, that's what the people of the country demand and deserve. A sound use of resources, and to go forward and build it in a way that provides for an improved, more effective outcome. You look at some of this infrastructure and it reminds you, when it's taken away, how significant it is to our quality of life and our profitability as a nation. A grid system that connects power to the sources that require it. A communications network that allows us to dialogue and build our profitability. The infrastructure that moves freight, our roads, bridges, highways. You talk about the damage done by salt-infested waters. Again, it's incomprehensible about what that score goes to in terms of impact. When you think of a subway system, rail system, energy generators, and all the power supplies within the utility infrastructure and communications, it's just, it's important for us to learn from these effects of the storms. And if we can put together concepts like an infrastructure bank, if we can put together the bond activities that will respond more compassionately and more effectively and more urgently to a given situation, then let's prioritize where we need to prioritize so as to make things happen. The infrastructure needs, we've talked about them outside the context of the ravages of Mother Nature. Water and sewer systems that just need to be upgraded because of the age of some of these systems, and the new technology that has been introduced where we can do it in energy efficiency formats, where you save operating costs for local governments. Now's the time when you've taken this blow, perhaps we can then retrofit to do state-of-the-art that will mean less costly operating expenses for local entities and NGOs and non-government organizations that allows for everyone to win, and the taxpayer dollar is stretched in positive, favorable terms to be a more effective outcome for everyone in the equation.